our Fireside chat about the future of work and the future of the cities. So how does the future of work affect the future of the cities? I mean, what is the dialogue from what you have presented to what Daan has presented that is created inside you and your thinking process?
Thank you for that question, Niki. In fact, wonderful session, Daan. I've learned a lot. And I think there are some really fascinating opportunities for the two of our topics to converge in interesting ways. So as everyone already knows, when I spoke about future of work, really I separated it into talking about the actual work that we do, the workforce that does the work, and of course, where we work. So of course, this last component is more obvious in terms of thinking about if we have people that are working in specific locations that are now more enabled than ever before. Perhaps the concept of cities, us all being congregated into one concentrated spot, becomes changed by how we gather as a community. But there's also these other components that fill into what future cities might look like. For example, when we think about the workforce, as we go into a future where we have a more aging population that is working, when we have a more diverse population, what does that look like in terms of future of cities, in terms of how those communities get together? Of course, when we even think about the actual work that we do, as we think about that and the overlap with future of transportation, which we covered yesterday, then we start to get a really different picture of what might cities look like.
Gary, I'm asking you the same questions, like how the future of the cities affect the future of work and vice versa.
So historically, an awful lot of the magnetic attraction of cities has been work opportunity. Especially if you're born in a more rural area, you went to the city because that's where you could get your training, that's where you could get access to work. There's no question that with this great reset, we've sort of changed the rules. And so think of it as a spectrum of work. There's work that can be completely virtualized and allows us to have a tremendous amount of choice for all the different places that we can do that work. And then at the other end of the spectrum, there's work that's very heavily anchored in place. What I hope is that more and more of the mindset that we come at this with is that we can be intentional about that work. And the work that needs to be done around a lot of other people, we can make sure that those are more livable places. We can make sure that people have more choice, because often the people that have these kinds of jobs don't have a lot of choice. We can talk about how virtualized so much of the work has become, but there's a lot of people that work in cities that are anchored in those areas. That's where the work is. They're working in a factory or they're working in a restaurant, and they have to be there.
So what we see is as the work is getting more digital transform, and as we have like a laptop and we can work from anywhere, then the city changes and then our options change. And that takes me to Daan. Daan, you said that you live where your laptop is. First, can you elaborate?
My home is where the laptop is.
Okay, your home is where your laptop is. So now you have to tell us how you go about it, and then the issue, I'm going to ask you the opposite perspective. How does the future of cities affect your work?
Yeah, well, I think it's really important to make a separation, right? Because you saw that from the future skill list.
Wow.
So on one hand, the machines are taking over, right? A lot of our jobs, a lot of what we're doing. So a lot of like values or how a city have become sort of meaningless or not future-proof, let's put it like that. So there's a lot, there are a lot of disciplines, a lot of work where we just are robot food, right? Like if I'm feeding my social media, my Facebook, I just get a likey in return, right? I feed it with my love, my time, my energy, and I get in return a likey. That's a bad deal, right? So I think on one hand, we need to figure out how we can separate us from the machines, that's creativity, and what kind of jobs and work and skills the machines are taking over from us. Once you figure that one out, you can say, okay, so these places where creativity is important, these places where we live, where we work, where we are human, they need to be designed in such a way that they trigger our curiosity. They trigger our desire to interact, to learn from each other. That's a true city. So I don't want to talk about work, I want to talk about learning, I want to talk about interacting, I want to talk about exploring. Because again, the robots are coming, they are taking over, and that's also a scary side. So let's make the humans more human, and the machines more machines, and let's design spaces which trigger our human side, not our machine side.
Yeah, and
You understand?
now,
Like,
yeah,
I
of
think,
course,
I think that's really,
definitely.
and we're not doing that, and that scares me a little bit right now. Can I say that? Yeah. Am I
Of
allowed to
course
say
you
that?
can
Yeah,
say
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Of
yeah.
course you can say. And what scares me also is when I realize sometimes that I feel like a prisoner of my laptop,
Exactly. You're in your bubble.
a prisoner of my emails.
In your
like
own
it-
curated little world. Yeah?
and then all the stress that I have, like 200 unread, 400 unread.
200? Oh my God. Oh,
And people
that's
are
scary.
sending emails, so scary. And I'm, like missing out. So what is the
Yeah.
information I'm missing
Yeah.
out? And people are sending me so many emails.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
how we can go about, Shuo? You mentioned before, you and also Gary, that work is problem solving. How we can move away from being prisoners of our email, how we can change the environment that we work. I mean, so far we have been working in an office, and that has been puzzling me for quite a while. We had to get dressed, go to a place, stay for 10, 12, 15 hours. That used to be office. And with the emails and Zoom disruption, and thanks to COVID, we stay at home, and we converted our kitchens and our living rooms into work. So how we can move away in a better deal?
Yeah.
How we can get a better
Yeah,
deal
less
working
depressing.
in a more human conditions? Shuo, and then Gary, and then you, Daan. I mean, I want to ask you, the experts.
That's a wonderful question. In fact, what is scary has certainly transformed over time. Last year during Halloween, there was this image on LinkedIn that went viral where this person, instead of setting up just a normal skeleton, had set up a desk, a laptop, and with the skeleton facing the computer, and that was the Halloween setup. So I can certainly relate to being tied and chained to emails and that being very scary in its own way. How do we move away from that? I think since the pandemic, we've had more conversations than ever before that focus on whole well-being, not just the part of physical well-being, but also the mental health component. So as you might already know, I've been serving on the California Mental Health Commission as a voting commissioner, and we've been doing a lot of work since the pandemic to think through how can we encourage more healthier practices at work, not necessarily restrained by the physical office, but wherever it is that you might do work. So it could be everything from having you return more to a physical space where you're better integrated with nature. It could include the right notifications to remind you this is the right time to get off of screens and build real human connections. So we talked about these new jobs being created, and it relates to also our sessions from yesterday where we talked about all of these new jobs of the future where they're going to be focusing more on the human components, more on compassion, more on strategy, more on creativity, less so on pure optimization. I do think that these are going to help us return to a much more humane working environment where some of the things that are more boring, we can automate and abstract away, whereas we get to focus on the things that we really enjoy. And I think that relates to Gary's point as well. I loved his chart where you have the things that we need, the things that we love, and just having that in the right order where that naturally leads to us becoming good and actually getting paid.
So what is critical, though, is, and this is, I'm not going to challenge what you're saying, Dan. There's no question robots and software can be very scary, and especially their impact on work. But the truth is, robots and software don't take jobs. They just automate tasks. It's a human's decision if a job goes away, right? So you're automating all of these, the drearier tasks. That's awesome, but it's always a Venn diagram. Is if you're helping people to develop the skills to be able to solve new problems, and you can make that more human-centric work. You can actually spark their curiosity and their creativity. You can actually design work to be much more human-centric. That is our opportunity. Yeah. But unfortunately, in the Great Reset, what you see is a lot of people, a lot of those who lead organizations that I talk to, they want to bungee cord back to the way that we did it before. They want it to be the horrible commute and the cubicle garden. And these are not ways to be able to make things more human-centric. We have a tremendous opportunity to say that we've broken the seal on this new way of work. We can make it much more adaptable to the needs of individual human beings. I mean, these are totally tractable problems. It's not that we have too much information. Clay Shirky, who's now the vice provost of NYU, his famous line is, it's not that we have too much information, we have filter failure. It's that we haven't gotten the technologies to help us to manage that
Exactly.
information
Yeah.
and to focus on leveraging our creativity
Yeah.
as opposed to just our productivity.
Yeah, no, you're right. And technology should be our buddy, who helps us to guide or navigate or keep us safe or inform us. And right now, I feel we're sort of in an in-between state, right?
Yeah.
Between peoples and machine. And I think we should challenge each other more to find a new harmony, right? Where we're sort of getting the benefits from it as well. And it's sort of helping us and to become better or we're improving. And I feel we're sort of, we're still searching for that.
Yeah,
We're
where's the Fitbit for information overload?
Yeah,
Like,
right now I'm feeding machines, and what do I get in return? Not that much, right?
More
It's a bad
machines.
deal. It's a
You got
bad.
more
I think we
machines.
should make a better deal. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying.
So,
Absolutely.
how a better deal looks like, Dan?
A better deal is where I'm being triggered by diversity, and I am triggered my diversity. So what you're saying is maybe we're going to work less, and it's more focused on empathy or storytelling or well-being or health, and it seems today the world is getting smaller and more isolated. So what I'm doing, for example, is very simple. Every week I do something I hate.
All right.
Yeah, it's very
so tell me about it.
So for example, last week I worked with clay. I hate clay. It's like your hands get dry, and
what did Clay ever do to you?
and it's like, and then I have to wait. I hate waiting. It's like an oven, and it breaks, and it's like, and because I work with clay, then I realized, I love light because light is flexible. I can adapt it, and so I start to reappreciate what I'm doing.
So you recalibrate your work.
Yeah, exactly. And so my advice would be to you, because everybody's, I want to be happy and we should strive for happy. No. Do the
I'm
things
happy.
you hate. Yeah, one thing, and not all the time. And because it helps you to be aware of what you love. And what I'm trying to say is, so if you create situations, and I showed you some examples of clean air parks or reminding you of a history, it puts you in a perspective and it helps you to trigger your diversity. And that's really important. That's what a good city and a good work environment should do. Yeah.
And Dan, if it's okay to add briefly onto
Please.
your point, I really like your advice on focusing on trying something new, that experience, even if you had a predisposed bias against it. Because
Absolutely.
It's not exactly predisposed. He said he hates it.
I hate it. Yeah.
So the reason why I really like this concept is I oftentimes talk to my students at Berkeley about this concept of, I think, diversity and technological innovation actually feed into each other into a positive feedback loop where the more diversity you have, the more different opinions you have, and of course that coalesces into more innovation. And the more innovation that you have, that feeds into more platforms that enable more voices to be able to actually surface. And so as a result of that, I do think it feeds into a positive feedback loop. So to your last point on that, I do think it's more important that we're able to hear more voices than ever before that speak out and talk about these different things. And so I think that's a really important piece. And to the second part of your experience, I really like how it's the very tactile experience of working with something in the physical world. I think we've been quite detached from the physical world for a while, where oftentimes we talk about future of work and it's mostly around AI and data, the work that we
More
do.
bits, fewer atoms.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we forget the actual atoms of our workforce. We forget the actual tactile pieces of our workplace.
Yeah.
How can we optimize the design of working spaces?
That's such a good comment, because the challenges we're facing are physical challenges. Yes. Sea level is rising. That's a physical challenge, It's not like some website we can just delete. No. Yes. And so for sure, technology, I love it, I mean, it's been around me from day one. But I think when you create it, we don't change because of numbers as a human being. We change when we have an experience, good or bad. It can be positive or negative. And so in that way, I'm not religious, but in that way, the Catholic Church really understood that really well. Huh? So you go to a church, you have filled with light, and in a language you don't understand, Latin, there's God, there's death, you have to do something. The walls have these stories in stainless, in glass. And so what these guys really did really, really well was the power of storytelling, and creating a collective experience and a narrative, And so when we talk about the future of work and the future of cities, maybe we should start talking about that. Like, how do we want that world to look like,
The narrative.
Well, and part of it has to be the diversity aspect both of you were talking about. I mean, Google did an analysis, long-term analysis called, believe it or not, Project Aristotle, to look at what helped to make the most effective teams. And they found only two things: psychological diversity and psychological safety. If you walk into a room and everybody looks like you, it's a fail. because you're not going to solve, they're all going to solve problems in the same way.
Yeah.
You're not going to get the creativity that you need to bounce off of new ideas. But it has to be psychologically safe. That is, you have to allow people to come up with the crazy, wild ideas at the front end of problem solving, because you might never envision what that moonshot or 10x thing could be unless you give people the safety to be able to do that.
And experiment. What I find interesting is to do the opposite things of what I'm doing all day. So, you know, when I'm like hijacked by my inbox and emails,
I'm not going to send you an email anymore. Now.
WhatsApp
just
me,
send
WhatsApp
her
me.
creative emails. You know,
Yeah,
really
I go up in my garden and then I spend time there without phones, without emails, nothing at all.
Yeah, so I can-
and
I can-
last night you were talking about your experience of growing your own vegetables and then cooking them. Do you want to tell us a little bit about, you know, I mean, being so much into AI and blockchain and so technology, yet you grow your own vegetables and cook them so that...
And are excited about it.
We wait for a dinner invitation. So do you want to share with us your experience?
I'd love to. I'm so glad you brought this up, because yesterday at dinner with all of our speakers, I was sharing with folks how geeky I've gotten into gardening and growing heirloom varieties. So heirloom varieties are ones that have been around for more than 100 years, of course not genetically modified. Oftentimes they're varieties that you can't find in grocery stores. So I love growing varieties that you can't otherwise access, and you can only actually enjoy the fruits of your labor by growing them yourself, quite literally.
Yeah.
So I don't have a very big space, but within my very small limited space, I'm growing 100+ varieties of different fruits and vegetables. And it's my form of meditation, because relating back to cities, oftentimes people feel way more in tune with their environment when they're able to pay attention and to be present in the moment. So when I go look at a lot of the plants that are growing, I notice a new leaf has emerged, a new flower has popped up, there's a fruit starting to form. Your awareness and consciousness of passage of time is very different than had days just flown by back to back.
So what you're doing is you're a consumer, but you're also a maker. You're a creator, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And so often society treats me as a consumer. Buy this, download that, ta-ta-ta-ta. But once I became a maker, a creator, I get a real connection, right?
Exactly.
So that's what you're doing, and that's really beautiful.
But Niki, you talked about a really important aspect,
nice.
I think, in our workday, which is what I call alternating rhythms. Is if you're just staring at that screen all day long, then what you're doing is you're falling into a pattern of doing the same thing, and it will always expand.
You become an automaton.
You're the machine.
Yeah, exactly.
And so you think of alternating rhythms, the more intentional we can become in our work, in choosing what we do, and understanding our own rhythms, and when we're optimized to do different things. And if you've been doing the same thing for a good period of time, you've got to shift to going out in the vegetable garden, or going to play with clay, or do something different.
And I would love to design those public squares, you know, a public square where you enter and you have no connection, you know, like no Wi-Fi. Or you have another square where you're hyper-connected, you know, like whoa, we know each other, but we don't know. Like,
Well, maker spaces are a good example of spaces set aside for creativity.
If I may build on what both of you have mentioned, if we were relating this back to Future of Cities, I do think it's important to integrate components of nature back in, because that's how we function in our best state.
Exactly.
So if you look at some of the latest research, by taking a 30-minute or even 15-minute walk in nature, that helps us focus way better, be much more in tune with ourselves. And on the city's point, I was walking around in Athens yesterday and exploring the city, and I noticed this street very close to Acropolis where it was lined with beautiful citrus trees. They were all oranges, and it was extremely bountiful. And not many people around on the street noticed how gorgeous these citrus trees were. And there I was, even though Acropolis was right there, I was just admiring the beauty of all of these citrus trees and all of these tangerines. So I do think that it does allow us to be more aware of our environment, even in cities, whether we're here for work, for interacting with friends, for spending time with awesome people like you. I think it is important to take a moment to appreciate our environment.
Well, we had a conversation yesterday that we would do the next Singularity Greece surrounded by Olive Garden.
Because
can you imagine? You know, like, I mean, this stage is great. Don't get me wrong, but it does this connection with nature and a rediscovery of our relationship with nature, huge.
I was
Right.
part of a workshop with the National Park Service in the U.S., and one of the things that we recommended, which is now doable in the United States, was that doctors could prescribe time in nature. That
Time
was
in the nature, yeah.
literally a prescription you could receive to tell you to go spend time in a park.
To close this amazing discussion,
No, we're going to keep on going for 2 hours.
2
Come
hours.
on, make a rule, break a rule. Come
You're
on,
in
Niki.
control of this.
You're in
Come on.
control.
So the next Singularity will happen in an olive grove.
Nice.
Like the Plato Academy that is started here in Greece. And imagine all those guys like Plato, he would walk and talk with people in an olive grove. Isn't that nice?
Are we invited?
Brilliant.
Of course.
Nice.
Brilliant.
I think we just invited ourselves.
I wanted to be polite.
Thank you so much for being with me, talking about the future of work and the future of the cities, the future of the cities and the future of work. I wish we had hours and days, but we will be back again next year.
Wonderful.
Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank
We
you so
will
much.
take a small break and I'll be back with another guest. Thank you.
Thank you.